my idea of scale and what I think Alex is doing, and not in terms of, is not that it's a 10 is really, really great and 1 is really, really low. It's like this, and there are different modes of influence, and that what we associate with 10 has to do with celebrity, and that's the word that I chose, and has to do with numbers of people who know you or listen to you when you talk. And so what you're saying is millions of people listened to us when we talked. And Direct Action to Stop the War acquired tremendous reach. And I associate maybe the scale with reach. And there is something lost with reach, and there's also something gained with reach. It's not effectivity. I don't put the words together with effectivity or influence. So that's why I put the Oprah here. It's not that she's the most well known. It's that when she talks, how many people listen, and that's all. And that's not a putting onto the 10. 10 is great and 1 is bad. It's just that's what 10 is. Yeah. That's how we define 10. And then the question is, what do you gain and lose as you move around?
So maybe you need a set of labels that are not qualitative.
Yeah, it shouldn't be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And it can't be loud and quiet, and it can't be anything. It's just got to be 10 words.
Left and right or something.
Yeah, just.
But not literally.
Maybe colors. That's a blue. Maybe that's what we're really talking about. That's a blue. And what do you get and lose in bluedom?
Scale. The concept was a little fuzzy to me in the description. I think I'm still working it out. But basically, some of the synonyms we jumped to were celebrity, or to what degree, how many people folks can reach. Scale. Their scale on...
How many people you reach?
But the measure of an individual's reach.
Not
exactly.
Not necessarily. No, okay. But I don't know. It's not to you.
Well, I mean, Alex described it on a scale of 1 to 10, which has been argued or debated, but 1 being the grassroots level, while 10 being, national prominence or international prominence.
George Clooney.
George Clooney, or people that people recognize as celebrities or as brands that people can.
Is the assumption that they're making greater change?
No, not at all. In fact, that
that's the problem with the word scale.
I know there's a significant loss of effectivity someplace on that map. But the thing is, I wouldn't say that I think 1 as being the grassroots level at all. I would describe 1 as being somebody who's making or who's doing something that's entirely local and is unnetworked. And so, I think of a kid making a video in their high school, showing it to their high school, and that's the end of it. And I don't think that that's any better or worse than 10. I think it's just a different form of activity. And that, for me, the scale is not just about celebrity, although at the top it looks like celebrity or branding, but it's about networking, it's about making connections, it's about the movement of information, and that from the local to the national to the international, so that by the time you hit even a 2 or 3 or 4, you're starting to network with other people in a town, or other people who are interested in the same thing as you, perhaps in other places. So it's a lot about network and the quick movement of information.
See, I don't see that at all in the way you originally framed it. I mean, it's totally different.
Very different.
Well, then I just didn't say enough.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you said that at the very beginning, but then the conversation quickly shifted towards celebrity and brand.
Because you guys used the word celebrity and brand, or I gave them to you, and there was one that was
You presented George Clooney as a 10, whereas I have no understanding of George Clooney as being involved in a social movement, or particularly network.
So that doesn't make sense.
As opposed
in the way you described it.
Whereas what you were just describing in terms of scale as network, to me, maps pretty closely in some ways onto effectiveness. So to the extent people see themselves acting in conjunction with other folks, and suddenly then in that sense, a 10 would
share your conversation with the group and wait.
That's
all right.
It's a clarifying question.
Important that David doesn't know who George Clooney is.
David has no idea who George Clooney is. I, on the other hand, who am a connoisseur of the Journal of Popular Studies, also known as People. exactly who George Clooney is. George
Well,
Clooney's an actor.
international name recognition is a part of what I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't
Very
necessarily
different from what you
relate
just
to any
described.
kind of networks or communication,
all.
effective communication tools. Like, it doesn't mean that because everybody can hear what you say, that everybody understands what you say in a way that means anything.
But the word
Absolutely.
that you use of networking is wrong.
So
Well, there's
networking
two words.
implies some sort of actual real-world connection to other people.
Not necessarily. It does to you,
It
but
does.
there's
yeah.
another
I'm
word.
sorry. The word networking to me
There's
means an
another
actual
word of
real
networking
connection
which
to
would just
people.
say that his image flies around the world.
Yeah.
It's networked through technology and through capital. You know, and capital was in my original definition, and
Yep.
it's still there. It's just that I think the capital plays less of a role than it used to, because there's certain ways to access that kind of networking. There's two meanings of it, like one that's effective and one that's ineffective, that are not just about how much money you have in your pocket.
I think you can infiltrate channels of communication that are dominated by capital. However, capital still dominates them. And so George Clooney's success is entirely about capital. And George Clooney's notoriety and any political statement marginally effective or marginally useful that he may make are subtle and minor, even possibly, if he's ever said anything interesting, infiltrations of that.
On the question of scale, I think movements is a term that most people either are so unfamiliar with or are freaked out by. And I actually think it's because of the scale of it. And so when we think about talking to or your opportunity to talk to larger audiences, we actually need to scale back and start talking about participating in your community.
Right.
Knowing your neighbors, self-determination within your neighborhoods. And that's the kind of scale that we have to start at.
But I think I completely agree, but I think that's the movement that we're talking about. I mean, at least for us, like everybody here, the movement that we think is at the foundation of building a more democratic and just society is a movement that's about engaging locally in your community on issues that matter to you. And some of those issues are truly global, and some of those issues are fundamentally about local issues in your community.
But can I come back at you? Because I agree with you. And I'm not even talking about engaging on local issues. I'm talking about the sense of isolation that you were getting at, that most Americans, people living in the U.S. have with regard to not even engaging on issues, but who are you next to me? And how do I actually get to know who you are so that our collective energy together might do something? Like, I think we're that far in many places.
I disagree on that. I think it's more
I just want to add the word cynicism, not just isolation. I mean, I think that one of the things, and I'll try to make this very short, and then I know that Leslie will want to jump in, but I said earlier, but it seems very real to me as a college professor who works with people, always talking to people who are 18 to 22, is that there has been some sort of shift in perception about the viability and effectivity of local action that I've seen in my own students, who are somehow lately been convinced that something only counts if it gets X number of hits. And I just never heard that conversation from 18 to 22-year-olds who used to believe, we all get together and we'll have a protest, or, I'm at a lefty school where students protest about everything. And, now they're like, well, if we can't get it on the blah, 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 why should we do it? So there's been this weird shift about the value of the local that is part of what I'm trying to think of.
I actually don't think it's that most people don't know who their neighbors are. I would say that I think the larger problem is taking the fact that 70% of the population opposes the war into feeling that is something that they can actually do something about and have an effect on, and that knowing your neighbor is a step towards that.